Hey guys, Ron here. A little bit unusual here. And I always say self-serving because it is self-serving, but I can't help it. I'm without a car today and tonight. Hopefully it's because of an error that the mechanics made months ago on my brakes. I really hope that's the reason why and not something new. I drive my car a lot too much and I'm starting to run it into the ground. I think, but again, this particular issue, let's hope I find out tomorrow that it's their issue. They fix it. Let's hope I get it back. Fingers crossed. So I'm going crazy without a car. And it's getting dark early now because the end of daylight savings time in California really freaks me out with my seasonal affective disorder. So I'm walking in the neighborhood. I'm going to walk down to a shopping center with a bookstore and some other places, restaurants and such, so there's some signs of life. And I'm going to tell you a story that I've always found very interesting. I heard it years ago, and then I saw a series loosely based on the truth, a fictional series loosely based on the true events, very loosely based on one of the streaming channels. So tonight it's the story of The Watcher, the house at 656 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey, which at least one family was the recipient of very threatening notes. And until they split, they left because of their fright. And I'll tell you about it. And while we're doing it, I'll show you some of the homes, or at least the townhouses in this area. Not that it's a real correlation, but I figured, oh yeah, sort of a correlation there. Maybe that's a stretch, isn't it? All right, so crowded here, I'll tell you, man. So the story of The Watcher is family moves in. Derek and Maria Broaddus are preparing to move in to 657 Boulevard in Westfield, New Jersey. A large home with their, I believe, 2 children. Now, Maria had grown up very close by, so she might have known some people, or they might have known her. In fact, one of the theories about The Watcher is somebody had a beef with Maria going back to God knows how long, maybe even an ex-boyfriend. So the family's preparing to move in, and they're slowly moving in. They're moving boxes in. They're going to renovate, and they start getting letters from someone who just calls himself The Watcher. And the letters start out, and I'm not going to read them aloud, but I'll paraphrase: welcoming you to the neighborhood. I'll soon find out your names. I have always been The Watcher. I've watched your house. I've watched 657 for nearly 20 years, the better part of 2 decades. My father watched it in the 60s until the day he died, and his father watched it in the 20s. Okay, so, and The Watcher also mentions bringing young blood to him or her. I'm going to say him because, I don't know, just him instead of her, but it could be a man or a woman, we don't know. Are you bringing young blood to me? Why did you move in? Was it because of greed? Was there another reason? A lot of references to greed. So the Broadduses, immediately after the first one, Derek calls the police, and the police read it, and of course they don't know what to make of it. Is it a prank? Is it serious? We'll check into it. And, they obviously can't figure out what's going on. They don't know what's going on. So they continue to get letters, and they continue to scare. And eventually The Watcher, of course, knows their names, mentions them by name, mentions that I believe the daughter was painting with an easel, something that couldn't really be seen from the front porch, which scares them even more. Things about, have you found what's inside the walls? Reference to the house. References that make it appear as if the Watcher was, we can go this way, is that the Watcher was someone who once lived in the house or wanted the house back or played in the house as a child. Kind of hard to decipher, but that's the way they wanted it, obviously. So they get very frightened, and before too long, Derek and Maria abandon their plans of moving into the house and go live with Maria's parents. Now, after this, they thought, the letters would stop because they're not there. And the letters keep coming. Why are you not in the house? When are you coming back? The house wants you. The Watcher mentioned 657 as being his or her, his obsession, his life, his duty. and threatening things about would you be in the basement alone at night? Would you let the kids in the basement? So on and so forth. So eventually it's too much for them. And like I said, so they moved to Maria's parents' house thinking the letters would stop, but they... So Derek immediately suspects the next door neighbors. Now the next door neighbors were like an entire family that lived there, an entire to the best of my knowledge, it was an elderly woman and her mostly middle-aged kids. Now one son was 60 years old, and he just seemed like an oddball to, I guess, Derek, and maybe even some of the other neighbors. Derek kind of focused on him as the prime suspect. And the police had actually questioned this guy. And, I don't know if I could say ruled him out, because how can you ever tell? So they had questioned him. Derek had suspicions about him. So at one point, Derek sent a letter to those neighbors saying that he was going to demolish the house, just to try to get a reaction, particularly from this family, and particularly from this one guy that lived next door. And there was no reaction. I mean, no reaction. They didn't write back. The Watcher never sent a letter mentioning it. They wanted to sell the house, but because there was so much notoriety, there were no takers. In fact, anybody who proposed to go under contract with them, they had to disclose the letters, show the letters to, and there were no takers. Then they had a proposition where they were going to sell the land and split it up into two parcels, two properties on there, and the Planning Commission turned them down because evidently the size of the lots had to meet a minimum requirement. I believe it was 70 feet, and there was going to be 67, so they were 3 feet short. So they were really playing hardball with them, even though obviously the Planning Commission knew about the threatening letters they had been getting. So eventually Derek admitted he started sending letters to the neighbors, sort of revenge letters, and because of his frustration over not knowing. When they had moved into Maria's parents' house, and for fear of staying in the house or continuing to move in and renovate the house, Derek, they all had the signs of anxiety that were very understandable. They said they thought about it every day. There was lack of sleep, depression, PTSD, all the things that are quite understandable. So he sent those letters to the neighbor, to no avail. Again, I may be helping to provoke one of the neighbors. Eventually, they rented the house to the tenants, and they said to the tenants, they gave them an out: if you get any letters, you can break the lease. And the tenant did eventually get a letter, and a pissed off letter, very angry at the Broadduses, I guess, for renting the house. So Derek received the letter, and went to the police again to no avail. And I left out a very important part. I apologize. The first thing that Derek did after he summoned the police after the first letter was to contact the prior owners, the people, the Woods. And actually, the Watcher mentioned the Wood couple, Mr. and Mrs. Wood, in one of his letters. So Derek went to the Woods and spoke to them, and they said they never got any letters. They lived there over 20 years. They did get one letter. They seemed to recall it was just 3 days before they moved out. So they dismissed it as, nothing, and never pursued it. So, as I said, finally they rented the place out, and what's that? Is that a TV on the ground? Wow. Looks like that's a TV. Nice neighborhood. So eventually the tenant, as I said, I don't believe the tenant had any more problems, and I don't think they moved out. All I know is that 5 years after this ordeal, and having never moved in, the Broadduses finally sold the house, and took a real loss when they sold it. I believe that couple, I have forgotten their name, but I believe they still live there. Now, what's interesting about the couple that bought the house was that they, to my knowledge, they haven't received letters, but they started getting alarms. Their burglar alarm, security alarm would go off in the basement. a number of times. 2, 3, 4, 5 times over the couple of years after they moved in, they had the police out for burglar alarms going off in the basement, the carbon dioxide monitor going off, things of a strange nature, and no one was ever found inside the house. And then when this streaming show started, with fans, of the show congregating outside the house and in front of the house and being weird outside the house, the police were called dozens of more times. A report in the New York Post said that between, I guess, 2019 and 2022, police were summoned to the house 80 times. I don't know if it's actually 80 times. Seems like a stretch. I know it was 3, 4, 5 times with the burglar alarm issues, and then it really picked up and escalated once the show aired. People, doing weird things, I guess, out front. So anyway, that's the story of The Watcher. It's a fascinating story, and it's unsolved. Was it somebody playing? People suspected the Broadduses publicity on their own house. Although, what did they gain? All they did was lose financially from doing it. Did they get their 15 minutes of fame? I don't know. And I don't know if they stayed in the area. Like I said, Maria was from the area, but maybe they moved away. Today, it's still unsolved. Was it someone who used to live in the house? They certainly alluded to it a number of times, that they had lived in the house and played in the house and were obsessed with the house. Why they'd be watching a house which was built, I believe, in 1901, from at least the 20s, and for 100 years hence, I really don't know why. But that's a mystery, and man, mysteries. I hate unsolved mysteries, and there's lots of them. All right, guys, tonight from the neighborhood. Hope the surroundings weren't too boring. Ron here. If you like the channel, please subscribe. If you do subscribe, please hit the little bell icon next to the subscription button, and you'll be notified as to when I post. And also, please give the channel likes. Please, guys, that's what really moves things and motivates people to keep watching, moves through the YouTube algorithm, excuse me. Comment in the comment section if you see fit. All right, guys, I'll see you at the next location. Bye-bye.